colleagues, the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Dismas Omondi. I am the team leader for the audit of the voter register of Zambia, working very closely with Mr. Ben Chegegumi. And we came in and started doing this work on the 6th of June 2016. As the chairman has indicated in his opening remarks, this has been a truly consultative and transparent process, devoid of any interference or influence from within or outside the Commission, and the best of our knowledge and ability, based on the amount of information and interactions we have had. We've done our work professionally, and we are giving today our final report of findings, which the Commission and the other stakeholders need to carefully evaluate and consider for implementation both in the long and short term, as we work to continuously increase the credibility of the register. I said when we started this work that we are not going to do an academic exercise, and we have lived to that promise. It will be useless for us to come and give recommendations that are purely academic, which cannot be implemented given the present circumstances and considering your plan for elections next month. We had a meeting to present our inception report in which we detailed the methodology that we are going to adopt in carrying out this work. We subsequently came up with a list of preliminary findings which we presented to the Commission and relevant stakeholders a few weeks back. The difference between what we have done in the past and what we are going to do today is that this now is the final report, which includes responses, reactions, and proposed actions or actions taken by the Commission to address some of these findings. Some of the actions taken or proposed will be done immediately in the short term before the elections. There are some which will go beyond the election. Now, I guess you have been given copies of the report. I will run you through a presentation that I prepared for this purpose, which summarizes the key highlights of the findings, our own observations, recommendations drawn from what the electoral laws of Zambia require for an electoral process to be credible, as well as international best practices on electoral systems and processes. So in terms of what we are going to cover today, those are the points. I don't think I need to read one by one. You can follow the same in the copy of the report that you have. And at the end of this, I hope it will be possible for us to interact by way of questions and suggestions, which then the Commission will consider taking on board in addition to what we have said. Now, to start us off then, we need to look at what the objectives of the audit were. And to address this area, we received a number of concerns directly from the Commission, some from stakeholders, political parties, which were sent to the Commission and then forwarded to us and edited. In summary, as it was documented in the terms of reference of the audit, the key stakeholder concerns, which then formed the basis of this audit, was an assessment of the details of the register for compliance against the legal framework. And the legal framework here we're talking about the Constitution of Zambia, the Electoral Act, which subsequently became the Electoral Process Act in 2016, we were to look at the accuracy in regards to completeness of each record, the presence of suspected multiple registered voters by unscrupulous individuals, as well as the presence in the register of deceased voters. In addition, we were to assess the register in terms of inclusiveness or comprehensiveness, with specific regard to the geographic, age, and gender distribution. In the first few days of our arrival, the issue of suspected foreign nationals, particularly in the eastern part of the country, eastern province, came up, and we took that as well on board and included it in terms of the work that we're doing. So basically, that defined the scope and objectives of what we're supposed to do. But first, I think it's important for us to be clear that the audit findings that we're presenting here today are based on a snapshot of the register as at the 6th of June 2016. A snapshot means any changes that occurred in the register, which anyway are going on because amendments from the inspection are still being processed, are not factored in these findings. So it's quite possible that some of the things we'll be saying have already been taken care of in the subsequent changes that occurred. So I thought it's important for us to state that we are looking at these findings based on the register as it sat, as it was on the 6th of June. Some basic background information. Your register was first created, the current register has been in use since 2005, getting to about 11 years. The records in that register originate from two different technologies that have been used over time. Starting from 2005 to 2010, you are using the optical magnetic recognition system. And in 2011, you introduced, or the Commission introduced, the biometric voter registration system. That introduction of BVR did not lead to automatic fresh registration of everyone. Only those that hadn't registered or that needed to update their records were affected. And so these two records from the two different technologies were marked into one database, which is in use up to date. And therefore, really, BVR in this sense was an extension of the OMR system to sustain continuous voter registration. And when I say that the introduction of BVR did not lead to automatic fresh registration of everyone, I am not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong that was done. There are countries that have taken the route that you took. There are those that have taken advantage of the introduction of new technology to register everyone afresh. Now, both of those are right. It depends on the specific and unique circumstances prevailing in the country at the time of introducing such technology. But generally speaking, biometric voter registration system is considered more advanced than the optical magnetic recognition system. And the key benefit that the BVR system delivers to the organization is its ability to uniquely identify individuals in the database using their fingerprints with an extremely high degree of precision and accuracy. But that doesn't mean that it is 100% foolproof. Other facts, as I said, until June this year, you have the Electoral Act, which was replaced by the new Electoral Process Act number 35 of 2016. All the records in the database were captured prior to the enactment of this act.
I think we are really confused. We don't know why we're here, because we're supposed to be given this for a week to go through it. We are not even connecting anything. We just see it here.
respond to that. This report has been discussed several times and presented to political parties and other stakeholders. So really, apart from the management responses and an update in terms of what action has been taken, there have been no new findings. Secondly, this is not the end of the story, because the Commission will continue responding and taking action on some of these recommendations even beyond today. And so, as long as you have been given a copy of this report, and as long as the register has not been certified for the election in August, I think all is not lost. You still can go through it even after this meeting and raise any issues that you think, in your opinion, have not been captured or not been captured adequately for consideration. That would be my view.
A point of order. I'd like to concur with my honourable colleague there with regard to the issues raised. We are finding it really surprising that this document should have been availed to us well in advance. There are several complex issues that need to be dealt with. We've been grappling with issues pertaining to the voter register not being presented to us in good time. As you are aware, the elections are around the corner. 11th of August, we are going to the polls, and we do not have that register. And how on earth are we going to comprehend this document, which is so complex and need for us to digest the issues therein and be able to articulate the issues and raise our concerns? I think for quite some time we've been raising serious concerns as regards to the delay in which the Commission has taken to facilitate the voters' register, which is really cardinal and needed for these 2011 elections.
As a board, I've noted your observations. Why don't the auditors present the summary findings? The document is with you, and the issue is the issues that they've raised will be responded to by the Commission. So our purpose will proceed with the audit making the summary findings. The document remains with you. Whatever issue you raise, please, the Commission is here. They are just presenting the findings.
Thank you, Chris. So, you had a voter registration drive in the last year and early this year. And as a result of that, when we extracted a copy of the register for analysis, it contained the particulars of 6.7 million registered voters. Those are the number of registered voters in the provisional register as at the 6th of last month, against a projection based on data from the Central Statistical Office of 7.5 million, which gives you a voter registration turnout of 89.24%. Now, in terms of how that number is spread across the provinces, and this table is actually in the report that you have, you can see the provinces here are listed in alphabetical order, but in total, from the registration drive of last year, a total of nearly 1.7 million new voters were captured, representing a growth of about 33% into your register. Now, that also includes, during that registration drive, the number of deceased voters and other ineligible persons that were in the register were moved, and the total number moved was 142,000 at the same time. Further details, as I indicated, will be processed arising from the public instruction, which was between the 15th and the 25th of May. Now, if you allow me, I just want to take you very quickly through the key audit findings in terms of what we have looked at, observations, recommendations, reaction, and action taken by the organization. Voter registration is anchored in Part 2 of the Electoral Process Act. And the Electoral Registration of Voters Regulations 2010. We've carried out a comparative analysis at national level of your own registration statistics against those of other countries in the region of interest. We have also looked at the geographic data and age analysis of the registration in your database. We will also, in this, look at the issue of suspected foreigners, deceased voters, and suspected multiple registrations. We'll mention what we found and what has been done. And then we'll also have a brief mention about the system of registration and publication of copies of the register. The requirements for registration, which are well spelled out in your Electoral Process Act, is that you must be a Zambian citizen, and proof of which is provided through the possession of the Green National Registration Card, the one which ends with a /1, not /2. And you ought to have attained the age of 18 years. And you must be, your mental capacity should be sound, and you should not be otherwise lawfully disqualified. Now that guided the work we did. We also looked at other provisions of the law and came up with the following two observations. One, that subsection 8.4 of the Electoral Process Act makes registration more than once an offense only when it occurs in more than one constituency. And that leaves it unclear as to whether one is allowed or can legally register more than once in the same constituency. And we are proposing that that ambiguity needs to be removed. We also find the restrictions in subsection 18.1 of that very act that provides for the inspection of a copy of the register as it exists at any one time at the Commission's head office during normal business hours and necessarily restricted. Imagine if you were in Southern Province and you have to come register to inspect the register here, or you were in Northern, and this is a very vast country. In our view, that negates the principle of transparency. But that is what the law is. You can only recommend based on what we have witnessed elsewhere, what can possibly be done. The electoral registration of voters regulations that you have in place, and I appreciate the fact that the Act only came into force in June, have not been updated and harmonized with the Act. I believe that will be considered in due course. In terms of the penalties for multiple registration, there are no specific provisions in the Act or the regulations that deal with the specific offense of multiple voter registration. This is currently, as is, dealt with through election offenses, the provision of on election offenses, which in our assessment we still find inadequate to deter persistent or serious offenders. And we emphasize in this point because this has become one of your greatest challenges. We think something can be done to make the cost of breaking that law a bit more punitive to the offenders. Our recommendations therefore arising from those observations, we are suggesting that you review the existing electoral laws to provide specific and enhanced penalties against multiple registration. It is done differently in different countries. There are those who remove all but one record, where a voter has got more than one record in the database associated with them. There are those countries that, having determined that you are actually multiple registered, you are registered more than once, carry out an investigation and an adjudication process ensues, which then leads to deciding on whether you should be left at one station or polling district in this case, or you should forfeit your right to vote in the subsequent election. We are also suggesting that the existing regulations need to be reviewed and harmonized In our view, providing specific provisions, making specific provisions on voter registration, on multiple voter registration in the Act would have more weight than carrying the same in the regulations as it is currently. When I looked at the regulations and the old Act and the new Act, I was of the impression that the regulation tried to cure that gap in the old Act, but unfortunately, that was still not reflected in the new Act that was assembled to be in June. The response we received from management, first, and I've not put everything here, is that the right to vote is guaranteed by the Constitution of Zambia, and it's an absolute right. Therefore, there is no other basis to deny anybody their right to vote. However, with that in mind, the Commission has committed to update and harmonize the existing electoral registration voters regulations and have them aligned to the Act. And there is an undertaking to propose amendments to subsection 8.4 of the Electoral Act to remove the ambiguity regarding the issue of multiple registration within and across constituencies. And this is something that will be done after the elections, a long-term proposal, which will be carried through to December 2017, that is next year. In terms of comparative analysis, we picked a few countries in terms of their voter registration turnouts against the projected eligible voting population for Zambia at 6,718,332 voters in the provisional register as at 6th of June, works out to a national voter registration turnout of 89.24%. You can compare that with that in Ghana as at 2012, where the registration rate was 98%, Kenya in 2012, 67%, and Zambia and Zimbabwe in 2013, 97%. And the only differences maybe I need to highlight is that in Ghana in 2012, as well as Kenya, when they opted to go for biometric voter registration, they took advantage of that to register everyone afresh. And mainly because the key objective of that introduction of that technology was to address the key concern of duplicates, multiple registrations. After the 2007 Kenyan general elections, an independent review commission was set up, and in one of their findings, one of their key findings was that that register contained the particulars of up to 1.2 million deceased voters. And in the view of the country and the commission then, it was thought wise, rather than try to find and identify these people for removal, register everybody afresh. That way then you get rid of all of them, and that is what happened. So really, this is a very high voter registration turnout, especially considering the fact that it is an active registration system where the commission has to go out consciously and mobilize people to register. That will pose challenges in terms of sustainability. We have also identified a few exceptions, and I will be mentioning those in due course. In terms of the spread of those numbers, the blue bar is the eligible voting population based on the projections from the central data, the Central Statistical Office, and the other color, which this is red, or let's just take it red, is the number of registered voters. And you can see clearly nationally the leftmost bars, you can see the 89.24%, and then across the provinces, more or less the same trend obtains. In terms of the gender distribution, the number of registered, you have your demographic structure is such that you have almost 51% females and 49% males among the eligible voting population. And that is the projection. The actual is almost the same. There is no significant difference. Then we have looked at the spread, how these voters were registered against the projections per province. Generally, the same national trend cascades across all the provinces except two, Western and Northwestern where the number of registered voters was actually significantly higher for some districts than the projections. And we have recommended that we need to look at what might have led to that so that we take action. Well, there's a wide deviation between the number of projected voters and the actual number. There are two issues that can arise. If the projection is too low than the actual, then you end up under-resourcing or allocating insufficient resources to address the needs of those voters. If the projection is too high than the actual potential, then you are over-allocated, and none of those is desirable. Either way, there are issues that need to be addressed. When you look at the performance in Northwestern, for example, you can see that the actual number of registered voters to date is slightly higher than the projected. And when you go to Western, it is the same. It could be because we don't know the factors that led to this. It could be because maybe some demographic changes occurred after the 2010 census, or maybe certain assumptions that were used to do the projections did not hold true. And when those assumptions do not hold true, then it means you have to go back to the drawing board. In terms of the spread by age group, we notice a significant gap in representation, particularly among the youthful voters. In the age bracket of 20 to 24, there is a representation gap of 39%. In other words, in that age bracket of 20 to 24, 39% of the eligible youth are not in your register. The reasons causing that require a study, require investigation, and once the findings are clear, then appropriate strategies need to be developed and deployed to address that gap. So that is a concern that is at national level. You can again see when we spread this across the provinces, it is still the same. And I'm talking about the gap where it peaks. You can see a huge gap, especially under the youth age group. Above the ages of 35 and above, you would actually see that the number of registered voters nearly approximates the number of projected eligible voting population across all the provinces, except just a few where you have some insignificant deviations. And the most one which is probably affected by this is, you will see Northwestern Province and Western Province, which is not surprising because when you look at the total number of registered voters in those two provinces, regardless of the gender and age split, you clearly see that you have more registered voters than was projected and targeted. So that pattern is consistent and applies across the gender groups as well as the various age groups. Our key observation, some of which I have mentioned, is that your national voter registration turnout is extremely high. It is neither the highest nor the lowest, but it's nonetheless very high. It requires significant investment in resources to sustain that voter registration turnout. I have already mentioned that your register is about 11 years old, and the numbers that are in that register possibly includes a significant number of deceased voters. We'll be getting to that specifically later on. When we compare the number of voters in the register in 2016 after the recent registration drive and 2010, you find that the voter registration turnout increased from 64.7% for men in 2010 to 91%, and 61% for female voters to 87% in 2016. I have already mentioned that some districts in Northwestern and Western provinces recorded a significantly higher number of registered voters than was projected, with some nearly registering double the projected number. And indeed, the top 5 districts by number of new voters added to the register in 2015-16 all come from Western or Northwestern. And I've said it's important for us, for the Commission to go out and find out exactly what led to this so that necessary adjustments can be done. I am not necessarily saying there's anything wrong. It could just be that the projections were not accurate for factors that we do not know at this point in time. I talked about the 39% representation gap among youths in the 20 to 24 age bracket, and that is something that cannot be ignored. Needs to be addressed. The recommendations arising from those observations are as follows. One, we are recommending that the Commission reassesses and addresses the factors causing wide deviations between the number of voters registered and the projected number of eligible voting population in parts of the country as well as for certain age groups. The case of Western and Northwestern stands out, as does the case of the youth voters in the age group of 20 to 24. And the Commission in response has said that an assessment will be carried out because we mentioned in our finding that the 6.7 million includes the particulars of an unspecified number at that point in time of deceased voters. An assessment of the projected mortalities will be carried out based on data from the Central Statistical Office to estimate the number of deaths of eligible voters every year so that that forms a sound basis of the number that the Commission should be looking out for to remove from the register. In terms of the factors that may have caused wide variations in terms of the number of registered voters versus the projected, a similar study will be carried out. Now, these again are long-term measures. Again, on the same issue of the projections, the Commission has undertaken to collaborate with the Central Statistical Office to understand these factors and make necessary adjustments. And the results of that study will be used to develop new strategies to enhance outreach, to increase registration weight is low, and to sustain registration weights extremely high, both in the long and in the short term. And this being a long term, the Commission has proposed to do this by the end of next year, 2017 December. On the issue of suspected foreigners in the register, we did go out to the field to do a field assessment for a number of factors. One, the time could not permit,